We are Campus Attic, by fans, for fans, racking up points on points on points, son. And that's what we're talking about this week. Points. You see, Oregon football these days seems to be resetting the record books on a weekly basis. Every broadcast they're talking about what Oregon did this week that reset this something or other. But there's two records that Oregon has that they haven't come close to touching in almost 100 years, and likely never will. Let's take a look at the most points Oregon ever scored in a football game. The Oregon Ducks racking up 60 points a game seems kind of old hat now. There was a time, though, when winning the game was just good enough. Now, though, anything less than 50 and fans seem disappointed, wondering what's wrong with the team. I mean, come on, they're only winning by 40 points. They clearly suck, right? It's time for the student section to empty out and hit the post-game party at Taylor's by halftime. To start the 2013 season versus Nicholls State, Oregon set a new record for most yards in a game in program history, along with several other marks. And fans complained that they weren't playing well enough. That makes it kind of scary to think what fan expectations might have been if the starters were left in for a full 60 minutes and the team was rolling. But even then, could they match the all-time mark? Not likely, because for all of the 60 and 70-point wins that have come to be expected today, it doesn't even come close to the highest scoring game in Oregon history. For that, we have to travel back a century, to 1910. Oregon football only played 5 games in the 1910 season, opening the year with a 12-0 win over Oregon Agricultural College. That's Oregon State today. That game will go down in the record books, though. Not so much what happened on the field, but in the post-game. It's one of the most infamous games in the history of the Civil War. Following Oregon's victory in Corvallis, a riot broke out between the opposing fan bases. It was a fight that continued all the way to the train station before Oregon fans could escape. Because of the incident, the 1911 Civil War game was canceled outright. It was simply deemed too dangerous to play. The following week after the Oregon State brawl, the University of Puget Sound from Tacoma, Washington came to Eugene on October 22, 1910 to take on the Oregon Webfoots at Kincaid Field to open the home season. Now, thankfully, Puget Sound wouldn't put up anywhere near the fight that OAC had the previous week, both during and after the game. Kincaid Field, by the way, stood where the Memorial Quad is now on campus. That's the open space between Johnson Hall and Condon Hall. There's a small plaque that's northwest of the Museum of Art that marks the area as the place where Kincaid Field once stood. Hayward Field replaced it for football in 1919. Kincaid Field was a place known for mud. It was the mix of a lack of turf and the fall rains that reduced it in late season games to nothing more than a pigpen slop, where it was known that on occasion the ball would actually get lost in the mud after pileup, and some players nearly drowned at the bottom. There wouldn't be any slowdown, though, due to field conditions on this day, October 22nd, 1910. It became the most lopsided battle in Oregon football history. Led by Charles Taylor, Oregon made Puget Sound look like a Pop Warner team playing an NFL squad, running over, around, and right through them. Oregon wasn't trying to run up the score, but Puget Sound was so inept, they couldn't help it. By the end, the scoreboard read 114-0. Right halfback Charles Taylor's stat line was just ridiculous against Puget Sound. He scored 7 touchdowns in the game. Keep in mind, touchdowns back then only counted for 5 points. He also kicked 14 extra points and 1 field goal, for a grand total of 56 points scored in a game by just 1 player. Taylor's individual scoring record remains the most points scored by an Oregon player in a single game. And the team total is more than 40 points more than any other tally the Ducks have had in a game before or since. Charles Taylor became a star, really the first Oregon player to earn national accolades and All-American consideration. For perspective, consider this. In order for a Duck player to break Charles Taylor's mark, they would have to score 10 touchdowns in a single game. The closest that anyone has ever come to that is 6 touchdowns in a single game. Saladin McCullough did that in 1996, and so did Kenyon Barner, repeating the feat in 2010. So will anyone ever score 10 touchdowns in a single game to break Charles Taylor's mark? pretty doubtful. Hey, we love Dat, but we doubt that even Dat could do Dat. Over a century later, Charles Taylor's amazing day and Oregon's 115-point victory over Puget Sound remains an interesting mark in Oregon history, and a pair of great trivia questions. Until next week, remember, it's always game day.